This NewJeans saga didn't just fuel another round of digital shouting, it rewrote the emotional DNA of K-pop for a massive audience, particularly for the casuals peering in from the edge of the dance floors. A sanctuary once forged in melody, gloss, and performance slowly rotted into a heavy, litigious mess that drains the soul. For the fans, the romance didn't die at once. It waned as the deafening noise just kept on rising higher and stranger. Instead of sultry teasers, dance breakdowns, or staged chats, the timelines clogged up with legal docs, press events, and overly scripted, tense official declarations now. Week after week, the plot drifted from the art to the dark power moves happening backstage. That name quit standing for fresh, bold innovation and began to trigger messy debates on fidelity, mental manipulation, and intense corporate warfare drama and lies. At this very point, the dream of a clean redemption arc feels nearly absurd, not because people are incapable of forgiveness, but because the rot wasn't confined to one moment or one error. It unfolded blatantly, loudly, and without rest. Endless litigation dissolved into nonstop media noise, and every push to regain the wheel only made the plight feel more frantic and less sincere now. What really ticked off the crowd wasn't the fight alone, but how it lingered on way after the true fallout started showing its ugly face. Watching the suits, artists, and idols panic once the courts shoved back felt less like a return to glory and more like a slow decay of all trust. The facade meticulously built over years started busting under the pressures. The crowd didn't forget the spun tales, how innocent squads got dragged into the mud, or how owning up to it always seemed to be pushed back forever. Even fans trying to keep cool found it impossible to love the tracks without being hauled into the drama. That persistent bad vibe is exactly why this whole story still matters. And that's why just moving on as if nothing changed feels so jarring to crowds. If you want to grasp how we landed here and why this case still splits the K-pop zone, be sure you're subscribed and keep watching, because this is only the kickoff of the wild stuff that really went down, baby. The thing that shook many wasn't just that NewJeans backed a main character in the fight. Loyalty, even when it looks totally irrational from the sidelines, is a deeply human instinct, right? Of course, they felt a deep bond to the one they believed shaped their souls and careers. That part alone was never the true issue. The horror was how that support played out openly and who ended up absorbing the heat because of it all. Once the clash spilled into the public gaze, the focus quickly drifted from contracts and internal laws and pivoted toward emotion-driven, fiery narratives today. Calculated statements were released, whispers floated, and specific narratives were pushed without naming targets openly. But everyone knew who was on the blasts. Suddenly, other idols found themselves dragged into a fight they had absolutely no role in ever creating. These idols were merely trying to survive in one of the most cutthroat games in the world, yet they became collateral damage in a messy adult power struggle. What made it darker was that NewJeans were not silent ghosts. Their alignment, willful or not, added massive weight to the accusations swirling online. When idols speak, fans don't just listen, they mobilize. Implications quickly spun into assumptions, and assumptions hardened into facts within fan sites. Harassment campaigns erupted, accusations of theft and favoritism spread, and innocent idols were forced to defend themselves for moves they never designed, approved, or benefited from at all. People loved to argue that the girls had no say in this, but influence doesn't require intent. Popularity alone shapes raw narratives. The lack of clear boundaries and duty allowed fans to believe they were fighting a totally righteous battle. Meanwhile, other careers were dragged through the mud with no cares for the damage being done. And that silence, more than any single statement, is what left such a deep, dark burn on the entire K-pop community. As the chaos escalated, the spotlight quietly moved from business spats to fan insanity, and that's where things truly spiraled out. Once idols became linked with a certain side of the battle, every statement, appearance, or silence was viewed as a calculated political move. Influence didn't demand intent anymore. The simple presence of NewJeans in the discussion carried weight, and that power reshaped how fans reacted. When stars hint at bad blood, even vaguely, fans don't pause to fact-check, they mobilize. What ensued was a tsunami of harassment campaigns that quickly escaped any sense of control. Groups that had nothing to do with the old conflict found themselves dragged into the narrative simply for existing under the same corporate structure. Accusations of plagiarism, favoritism, and industry manipulations spread as if they were established facts. The concept that the girls had no say became a shield against accountability, even though influence and responsibility are not the same deal. Careers built on years of work were suddenly questioned overnight. Not because of evidence, but because fandom spaces thrive on emotional certainty rather than any nuance. This is where many started to feel uneasy about the concept of a clean comeback. There was never a clear moment where the harm to others was truly admitted. No pause to say things went way too far. No effort to admit that innocent souls were being burnt in the process. Everything remained framed as a lonely battle, NewJeans against the world, and that framing wiped out the collateral damage entirely. Disappointment rose because the image of being distinct and progressive started to clash with the reality of unchecked consequences. Public sympathy had been fired up before facts were fully examined, and once emotions took over, corrections were dismissed as propaganda. The web doesn't handle complexity well, and this crisis demanded it. By the time legal realities began surfacing, trust was already broken, and many viewers felt less informed and more manipulated. That loss of credibility is not something hype alone can ever fix, babe. What truly drained the fans wasn't just the scandal itself, but how completely it hijacked the entire K-pop ecosystem. Once the feud became public, there was no cooling off period, no moment where things slowed down and allowed the audience to finally breathe. Every week brought a new statement, a new article, a new big spin, and fans were expected to keep up as if it were mandatory reading. K-pop stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like a never-ending legal briefing that no one ever signed up for. Since NewJeans sat at the storm center of it all, every unrelated chat somehow circled back to them, whether it made sense or not. Returns from other bands were instantly reframed through the lens of the drama. New debuts were accused of stealing wild concepts. Praising a performance or a song suddenly came with moral implications, as if enjoying music meant picking a side. Neutrality became unacceptable. If you liked one group, you were accused of backing corporate abuse. If you stayed silent, you were labeled complicit. Even openly loving NewJeans became uncomfortable because praise was instantly politicized and weaponized in fan spaces. This heavy tension quietly pushed crowds away. Fans didn't leave in dramatic protest, they just disengaged. Stress levels dropped once they stopped opening comment sections. Engagement dipped because watching stages no longer felt fun, it felt loaded. Music became secondary to arguments about executives, lawsuits, and internal power battles. The joy that originally pulled people into K-pop was buried under endless discourse, and that kind of burnout doesn't disappear the moment a new song drops. What made it worse was that nothing ever truly cooled down. Each update reignited the same fan wars and accusations, creating an environment that felt hostile and mentally draining. For many people, stepping back wasn't about hating stars, it was about protecting their own peace. By the time the noise finally slowed, the emotional connection had already snapped, leaving behind indifference where excitement used to be. This is why the idea of everything resetting like nothing happened feels so uncomfortable to so many fans. It's not about punishment or wishing failure on anyone. It's about the lack of true reflection. There was never a clear moment where the chaos slowed down and space was made to confess that things got messy, that people were hurt, and that the situation spiraled tragically beyond what anyone can control. Instead, there was noise, escalation, and then silence. When that happens, a comeback doesn't feel exciting. It feels awkward, like showing up after causing a scene and expecting everyone else to pretend it never occurred. A lot of fans aren't angry anymore, they're just disconnected. The emotional bond quietly broke during the height of the drama, and once that bond snaps, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Support isn't automatic. Fame buys the drink, but it won't win the heart. Staring at a train wreck isn't love. It is just messy gawking. The spark died, the bed is cold, and honestly, the silence between us screams louder than any fake fan chant. The mask slipped, the illusion shattered, and eyes are wide open now. You cannot unsee the ugly truth, darling. Ignoring the red flags will not fix us. If you want a second date that actually means something, drop the act. We are done with the fake smiles and cheap talk. We need raw truth, deep change, and you finally owning up to the messy scars instead of acting like nothing ever happened. Walking away isn't spite, honey, it is pure self-respect. The thrill died, the romance faded, and that heartbreak is valid. Do not gaslight us into staying. You might hate the rejection, but you must grasp why the passion cooled and why we are all essentially leaving the room tonight. If you stayed for the drama, whisper your secrets below. Play nice with the others. And if you crave more juicy exposes on the industry's shadows, smash that like button, sub, and ring the bell so you absolutely never, ever miss the next dark scandal drop.